Yes, here we are. It's kind of like a second go-around for us today.
Yes, fun today was Miranda's first time doing Sabbath school. Like before, I think we had done, like they would ask us every now and then, you know, like, I don't know, how long were we here before they started asking us to teach?
I don't know, maybe a year?
About a year. And then it was just like if somebody couldn't make it or they had a fifth Sabbath or something, nobody could do it, I'd ask us. And then they decided to, you know, kind of rework everything, and they were starting with new schedules and stuff, and they were going to have us teach the, go back into like the regular rotation, because I had mentioned something in Sabbath, even picking up extra Sabbaths, because our schedules got crazy. So somebody said, oh, let's have the women teach. And it didn't go anywhere until a few weeks later. And then, Russ, how did it come back?
Oh, actually, he kind of said, well, he didn't say let me know, but anyways, I said I'd let him know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they did kind of
at that meeting, right, at the end.
Yeah, so I said, well, I'd let him know. So I thought about it for a bit, and then he's not always at Sabbath school. So when he was there, I went ahead and let him know that, yeah, I was willing to do Sabbath school.
Occasionally, you're there every fourth Sabbath.
Every
fourth, so Miranda's in the regular schedule. So it's kind of cool because I can't do it, and she does it. And she did her first one today, and it went really well. It was fun.
It was fun. Yes, it was fun. But I did take Brett.
I did go.
He's my. Yeah, we did assault there.
Yeah, basically we did assault. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, we did assault. So Brett doesn't mind helping with stuff, but nothing that he has to actually prepare himself.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. It really does.
Because she does it, then I can lead it. I can look at it, and it sparks a question or an idea, and I can run with that. But Miranda does all the meat of it and the planning of it. And then if I can, you know, make colorful commentary or something comes up in class, I can, you know, then that's fun. And that's not stressful for me. That's actually fun. And Miranda had some. I like it because Miranda, I mean, the other teachers do really well too. It's just, you know, you go in and you look at the Sabbath school, and you read the Sabbath school, and you teach the Sabbath school, and you know, got a regular Sabbath school, and that's fine and good. A lot of people enjoy that. It's just Miranda takes it from a different perspective. She'll look at something, and so that's the way they're presenting it, but she'll find this other. It's like when I teach in photography. When you're taking a picture of something, take it from as many different perspectives as you can, because you're going to find something golden, you know, instead of just the typical. And that's kind of what Miranda does with whatever the topic is. You can look at it from all these different angles and find some really interesting stuff about it.
Yeah, just so happens the next topic is going to be Abraham.
Yeah.
And if some of you don't remember, we went at Abraham, I don't know how many different ways there for weeks on end.
Yeah.
And so.
And you're looking through it, though, and it's like, oh, you know, God's mission, no, this, and then ours is number 4. Abraham. It's like only one Abraham in there, and that's on her weekend. It's like, well, there was divine planning.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
That was fun. Mm-hmm. But today was something we'd done before, too. We had done
the armor of God.
The armor of God, and that's what today's lesson was on. And anyway, we thought we'd share a couple of things that we did in Sabbath school.
Right, yeah. Well, first of all, Brett started everyone off with, you know, how was your week this week? And if, you know, you take a look at all 6 pieces of the armor of God, and which one did you find yourself most in need of? And if you're going to pray for someone, what would you, which piece of armor would you pray for them?
Yeah. Now, before this, Miranda had rewritten her thing and had already kind of picked one of the pieces of the armor of God to focus on, which was interesting. And so we just threw them up there, and, you know, we went around the room, and it's everybody, you know, which piece, you know, and a really interesting thing happened.
Right, because I had picked the shoes of peace as being the most important, basically. And even though you could argue really that any piece was most important, and literally you can't do without any of them, but I picked the shoes of peace to focus on. And the first 3 or 4 people, shoes of peace, shoes of peace, shoes of peace, and a couple other things, and then more shoes of peace.
Yeah, it was because I would have gone, you know, helmet of salvation. I'd have gone sword of the spirit. I would have thought people would have gone, you know, like that. The shield of faith, I thought, would be the number 1.
I thought the shield of faith would be too.
And it was just shoes of peace. And I was like, wow, well, this is really coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. So basically, you know, like I said, one piece isn't necessarily more important than the other. Take, for example, you know, so that's getting dressed, right? I just want to add here that basically, while we picture putting on the armor of God on the outside, right? Because that's how the soldier, you know, you see the picture of the soldier putting on the armor of God. I'm going to say that the armor of God isn't something that we put on the outsides of ourselves. It is something that is put on our hearts. God uses that to protect our hearts and to change our hearts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can't pick a more important one, basically, because if you're missing one piece, it just leaves you more open and vulnerable to, back then, I mean, literally death, right? And so, I mean, just like, you know, you get dressed in the morning, you're going to go to work or wherever you're going, and I mean, which is more important? And what would you do without? Your shirt, your pants, your shoes, your socks, your underwear, your belt? I mean, which one are you going to do without? Because they're all kind of important.
You ever had that dream where you go to work or school or something, you don't have any pants on or something? Have you ever had that?
No, I haven't, but I remember once when my oldest daughter was just a baby, you know, and an infant. She wasn't even a year old yet. So I suppose I was, you know, so I was getting ready for church, and I was wearing a two-piece. I was wearing a sweater with a skirt. And so I'm getting ready to walk out the door, and my sister just so happened to be there that weekend. And she looks up, she looks at me, and she looks down, and then she looks back up at me like, So I look down, and there I am. I'm just standing there in my slip and my sweater. And I'm not ready to go to church like I thought I was. I was all ready to walk out the door, thinking that I was dressed, but I wasn't. I would not have wanted to arrive at church in my slip. That would not have been good.
No, that would not. And this was Alaska even. So I don't know.
No, actually, we were living in Colorado at that
I was going, how are you going to go out the door and just it's Alaska? You're full coat or something.
Yeah, it's true.
I've never had that. I've heard people, everyone has a dream. You're in school and you have no pants on. And that's never happened to me. I've never had that dream. It's like a comedy go-to thing, and it's supposed to be this common dream. I've never had that, but she has a better story than I did. The only weird thing I ever did was, I think I had 2 different shoes on once.
Oh.
That was it. Although in the 80s, you know, there was many days where whatever we were wearing just simply didn't match, but that was kind of the thing to do in the 80s. So, but yeah, I never went to school with just a slip or anything. No.
I hope not.
No, it's interesting. But yes, and I thought that was, you know, when you start talking about what's the more important pieces, you know, of the armor of God and everything, and we talked about that, and then moved into it's not really, you know, wearing on the outside, because it's a symbol, you know, it's, you know, Paul's making a point, but when you talked about it's actually, you know, what your heart is putting on.
Yeah, because all of the pieces of the armor of God are actually attributes of God.
Right.
And he wants those to become part of who we are. Not just something that we put on the outside to look good, to look religious, to feel religious and such. It's there to change our hearts.
Yeah, if you think about it, each piece is something God does, not something we do.
Yeah, it's true, absolutely.
Salvation, faith,
Yeah, which is why last time we talked about this, because Brett and I actually, I don't know if we actually kicked it off, or did we kick off the quarter?
Yeah.
Yeah, with, so the first quarter, for the first Sabbath of this quarter, it was actually about the putting on the armor of God as well. And so that time I compared, of course, putting on the armor of God, instead of turning us into a rough, tough, beat-em-up soldier.
Or a gamecock. Aspen and I just had a conversation about the University of South Carolina, and I was telling her about, we should get a sweatshirt, because she likes to wear my hoodies, and which is really cool. And she said, USC, and she looked up and and she said, what's the mascot for the University of South Carolina? And it's a fighting chicken. She was very impressed. I don't know why I told you this. Oh, because it does not turn us into fighting chickens.
Right. No, it doesn't. It turns us into little lambs in God's green pastures, because that is where God does everything for us. And that is basically what the armor of God does for us.
So do you see how that's, you know, we're earlier talking, like, you know, a different you're looking at something, and there's your typical the armor of God, and we always see the person decked out in the Roman, and that's what we're talking about. But taking that different perspective, it's not something you wear. It's something that guards your heart. It's not something that turns you into a mean, lean, fighting Christian. It's really the Lamb of God. You'd look at Psalms 23, and it's like, well, it's really the shepherd who, does the fighting and does the leading and does the guiding and does the feeding and does the... And so, it's the full armor of God. It's everything he does. And we're the lamb. And,
Yeah. And so since we are more prone to injury, if we don't put on the full armor of God, we asked if anybody had ever had any broken bones.
Yes.
I was really surprised. Every single person in Sabbath school had a broken bone at some point in time.
Yeah. I thought I'd get most. I didn't think everybody. The one woman, I was really curious to hear more. She said she'd broken so many bones, and I was like, you?
Yeah.
It's like somebody you would not expect,
No, she always comes very nicely dressed. She's always well put together. Just her and her husband always match and that sort of thing. And yet apparently she was quite the rough and tumble little girl or young woman. What did you say? She motorcycles and
did stuff.
And various, other things.
And then another guy in our Sabbath school famously broke his hand, I guess, and had to wear his cast, and his wife would complain about how much she had to do for him and take care of him. And everybody went around. And I had a story where I broke my arm when I was in high school sweeping backwards with a push broom. So if you just take a moment and imagine what that looks like, and why would you sweep backwards with a push broom? Well, this is what I was like in academy. And I fell over a pickup truck and broke my arm. And we all had these, they had these stories. But then to top off all they had good stories, but the real horror broken bone story was at the end with Miranda, who will now tell you her horrific.
Yeah, I felt like, after everybody told their stories, real stories, and some of these kids were 6 when they'd broken their arm or something,
Bones hanging out. And then
I felt very fortunate that I was in my 40s when I broke my first and hopefully only bone, right? I broke my little toe. It sounds so pathetic, doesn't it? And it is. It really is. But on Friday night, we'd had people over, for the evening, and we had set up some extra chairs in the living room, like dining room type chairs. And so that night I thought, well, I should probably put those away. But I was like, it's late. I just want to go to bed. So the next morning I got up early, 6 o'clock or so, and I go downstairs to the living room to have my morning devotional time. And I think as I passed by them that I should probably put those away. And once again I go, no, I don't have to put them away right now. We'll get those later. Well, sometimes it's our conscience speaking to us, right? And if we don't listen, things happen. And so when I got up later, as I was walking past those chairs, my little toe just so happened to jam into the legs of one of those chairs and broke my little toe. Well, you don't really realize it right off. What made me realize I broke my toe was that I could feel the two bones moving back and forth against each other if I stepped on it just right. So, and Brett had no sympathy for me whatsoever. Because honestly, I have a really high pain tolerance level. And so outside of the bones occasionally moving back and forth against each other, I didn't really feel pain in particular. So he's like, no, he looked at it. I don't think your toe was broken. I was like, I think it is. He's like, well, let me take a look at that. Mr. Almost a nurse, right?
Yes.
And so the top part of it looked fine, but when you looked underneath it, it was fully bruised and stuff.
And that's when you see it.
He's like, oh, all right. I guess you have broken your...
But she wasn't acting like... I didn't say this absolutely. My mom or dad, one broke their toe, and it was one of them, and they had, broken other things. They said that was the most painful thing they had felt, because there was no escaping it unless you just put your foot off the ground and didn't put any weight on it. It was always, and so she wasn't acting like it hurt.
It's true.
Broken bones hurt, and she wasn't acting that way.
It's true, and so honestly, it was Sabbath morning, and I had a pair of shoes. They were like just these actually cheapo shoes. I think I paid $5 for them at Payless at one point in time. And they were made of this stretchy fabric, and they were a flat shoe. and they were in the color of denim blue. So for the next 6 weeks at church, I've worn those shoes everywhere for the next 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, the pain was gone. And like I said before, the only time I really felt pain was when the bones would move back and forth against each other. But
there really isn't much to do, especially for a broken little toe. You don't put it in a cast. You really don't. You just take care of it and let it heal.
Yeah. And so we did. And it it was absolutely amazing. After 6 weeks, pain was gone.
Yeah.
So.
Not sure why we told you this story.
Yeah. Well, no, because it was so fascinating and interesting.
Yes. Very. Why did we include that?
Well, because we can become injured if we aren't wearing the armor of God.
Yeah, because we mentioned in Sabbath school the shoes piece, and I would say that's something that back in the day that was a soft point in battle. If you could injure the enemy's foot, you had them, because they can't run, they can't walk, they can't really fight, and that's because broken toe and everything.
Right, and like Brett said about one of his parents who had broke their toe, is that it was just this constant intrusion into their life, and that's kind of like how pain and aggravation, irritation, it doesn't cause us any peace. It doesn't give us peace in our lives at all. It is always there, irritating us. An irritating neighbor, an irritating coworker, aggravation of waiting in lines for things.
Waiting.
Yes. So it doesn't bring us any peace, right? So those are the externals that disrupt our peace, right? But Paul says we don't fight against flesh and blood, but the battle takes place in a realm that we cannot see. And so take the disciples, for example. When they were out in the boat with Jesus in the storm, and the storm came up, they fought against what they could see. And they had no peace about that at all.
Right.
And they forgot entirely that Jesus was even there. And finally, they remembered, and they woke him up. And Jesus, of course, he calmed the storm. Because he's the one who's able to work in the place that we cannot see. All we can do is call on him for help.
Yeah.
That's all that we can do. And there is a good shepherd who is fighting for us and taking care of us.
Yeah. It was interesting that they, fighting the storm so much, and they forgot Jesus was in the boat. Much like Aspen, I think, forgot to put that picture up that I got off the internet just for this very moment in our talk.
Oh, okay. Well, apparently
there was a really cool picture. But
apparently she is probably going to get something.
Oh, it's too late now. We're done. We've moved on.
But anyways, okay, so we want peace. Obviously, people want peace. We heard about that in Sabbath school today. So many people who this week wish that they would have had more peace, and they were wanting peace. And they wanted peace for other people in their lives as well, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's... I said later, I was thinking about, I know I used to preach on there's something about peace, and it was like this journey of peace and longing for peace. And my point was, I remember, it just came to me. It was... life, our big struggle in life is really we're always searching and grasping after peace. And we may not think of it that way, but everything we're grasping for, reaching for, working for, internally, really, we're searching for peace. You might call it, financial security. That's a form of peace. You might call it, relationship security. Again, peace. Peace in relationships. And so then the 12-step recovery, we actually break down the 12 steps, and they're all about finding the peace that passes understanding. Peace, the first 3 steps are peace with God, then peace with others, and peace with yourself. And as you go through the steps, you find this peace that is all your connections. It's your connection with yourself inward, it's connections with yourself outward, and connections with with God upwards. So if all areas of your life are at peace, you're not at war with anything or anybody. And that's kind of an example of walking in the shoes of peace. Every part of your life has this peace, but it's not something you can generate. It's something that God can work in you as you live by faith.
Right, right. Something that only God can do. And so, but sometimes, we want peace, and so we come at it from an angle that just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
So we think we'll have peace if all the things that are outside of us are if our circumstances would just line up the way we want them to line up. If people would just do the things that they're supposed to be doing, that we want them to be doing, then we think that we would have peace and that our lives would be perfect.
But peace isn't, because that's control. And with some, we try to equate control with peace. And if we have control of everything, we're at peace. But you're never, if you use control as your, gauge of getting it, you'll never ever get it.
No, and it's all of the situations really are like the disciples in the storm. They had no control over the storm.
Right.
They just didn't. As humans, we don't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
And so peace is not obtained in the physical world. Peace is obtained in the spiritual world, and that's only what God can do for us.
Yeah.
So, shoes of peace, according to Ellicott's commentary and pulpit commentary.
I'm going to help Aspen for a moment. I think she's looking for a power cord so we don't lose the iPad. Okay.
No, I found a cord.
Yeah.
The problem is that I can't plug it in because there is no extension cord.
Oh, gotcha. So you can't plug it into the adapter there.
I mean, I can, but then I can't plug this in it.
Right. Gotcha. Keep going.
Keep going. Okay, so technically,
I'm going to help her.
While we always say shoes of peace, right? That's not exactly what that Bible verse says. It says, the text says, having strapped on the shoes of the preparation of the gospel of peace. So I'm not going to get into all the details of that, right? Okay, but basically, the Ellicott's commentary and the public commentary, they suggest that the shoes of peace, the gospel of peace, there is the gospel of peace is the word of God, right? It's yes. Well, I'm I'm lost. Brett has left me. No. So they suggest that is the words of God, right? And so the Roman soldier, their shoes, the sandals had the hobnails on them, right? And so they're supposed to stand there because those help you keep traction. The hobnails, that would help keep them keep traction on whatever terrain that they were on. And so we are to firmly plant our feet into the gospel of peace, which is the gospel of the good news, right? The words of God. And when you take that down to the simplest form, they said, that is simply the love of God. The love of God for us, right? And so there we are, standing in the love of God, right? And that's where all the other pieces of the armor of God come into play here as well, right? Because when we stand in God's words of love, we're also standing in His truth, right? And in His righteousness, in His salvation, and in His faith. It is all there.
Mm-hmm. So today, we should be fine. But when Aspen starts waving her arms, the iPad will be starting to go dead.
Okay, well that's good because we
we're almost there.
We have just like this much left.
Yeah.
Yes, basically barely more than a paragraph.
And you talking about standing on the Word of God, standing in the Word of God.
In the Word of God, yeah.
And
because those the hobnails on there are going to give you that extra traction.
Right. Yes.
The peace apparently is going to help give you extra traction in being able to love. Actually.
Yeah. Yeah, like for the Romans, it sounds like a small thing, but it actually gave them a huge advantage in battle because they didn't slip and slide all over the place. Because when you're fighting in a field, it gets muddy, grassy, gets slick, it's slippery, and they actually had an advantage because they had traction. And ask any athlete, football player or soccer player, there's a reason there's cleats on shoes, and so it was no small thing. So we're saying when you're standing in God's truth, when you're standing on promises of God. It's no small thing. It gives you traction in life. It gives you, grip to hold on to.
To hold on to and to live out that loving relationship with God, which of course leads us to living out loving relationship with the people that are around us, even the ones who aren't giving us very much peace on the outsides of our life, right? And so now, so faith basically, it just really walks hand in hand with this. So faith, taking it down to its simplest form, like I said, is simply living out a loving relationship with God. So first of all,
Well, don't just take that in for a second.
Okay.
That's very faith. Simple, purest form is living out a loving relationship with God. That's it. If you think about everything, faith is being in a good, peaceful, loving relationship with God. That's it. Everything comes out of that.
right, it's true.
That's how simple it can be.
Yes, it's how simple it can be, yes. So basically, first of all, when Jesus taught his disciples how to pray, and he gave them the Lord's Prayer, right? One of the first things he mentioned was that they were to ask to do, that the will of God be done here on earth as it is done in heaven. So I think this should really become a part of each of our daily prayer, right? Is that the will of God be done in our lives here on earth as it is done in heaven. And it is done in heaven by the angels simply because they love God so much. They love him so much that they don't even have to think about it like that. He just says it, and they do it without hesitation because they love him, right?
It's just like my students in my classes. They love me so much.
Teacher joke.
That's a teacher joke.
Okay.
They love me so much, they do it. No. But isn't that interesting, though, that if you think, because I think a lot of people pass over that, and you learn the Lord's Prayer, and you say it, and you say it so many times, you don't really, so how many times do people actually think, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? Do they really know what that means? And I like your explanation, how it's done in heaven, and like, it's doing God's will is a reaction, a natural outpouring of their relationship with God, their love of God. It just, yes, of course I would.
Right. And so how does God express or tell us, express his will to us? Like, how do we know what his will is? Right, by his words, right? And that the words there that we're standing in, the words of love that he has told us about. So if we go to Hebrews 11, the great faith chapter, right, it says things like Noah. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I am talking about Noah. Sorry.
You are. By faith, Noah.
By faith, Noah built an ark.
Yeah.
He did what God told him to do. He did what he could do because then God says, well, I want you to do this because I'm going to send rain out of the sky, and there's going to be a flood that's going to destroy the whole earth, and this ark is there to save you and anybody else who wants to be saved from this flood, right? And so this was where he went ahead and he did build the ark because he believed, which was what he could see. He did that because he believed that what God said, even though he had no real concept of that, was actually going to happen.
Yeah, because remember, you probably know, but remember at that point there hadn't been rain. The Bible says the ground was watered from dew coming up from the ground. They didn't know what rain was, and so that's a big leap of faith. So the rain's going to fall. It's almost as equal as saying here in Texas it's going to rain. It's like, what, rain? What's that?
Yeah,
that's how it's felt for the last.
True, yeah.
But yeah, so he did what he could see, having faith in things he couldn't see. Just like Hebrews also, Abraham did this, and it was accounted to him as righteousness because he acted in faith.
Right. So faith lived out is simply living out a loving relationship with God.
Yeah, and don't wait to build the ark. Noah was asked to build the ark because of all the other things he did every day that, like you say, doing the things and in the Bible, the things that we know to do, that God says to do, because he doesn't ask all to build the ark. He says, spend time with me by reading in the Word, spend time with me by talking to me, and then tell somebody else about it. Help other people as I bring them into your life. And as you do those simple things, those 3 simple things, that's how Noah was ready and able to act in faith, and build an ark, and Abraham was able to do things, and it's the little things every day that they did that's seemingly insignificant, but it was just simply being in a relationship.
Right, being in a relationship. And we talked about that in Sabbath school as well. What was that question that the one lady asked?
Oh, what does it look like?
Yeah, what does it look like?
What
basically?
what does living a relationship every day look like? What does, doing God's word look like? And she wanted a simple.
Yeah, and I talked about a little bit last week about the book that I've read again recently, read it about 12 years ago, and have read parts of it again recently, is The Practice of the Presence of God. It just talks about how okay, so this guy who was a friar back in the 1700s.
He was a cook.
Yes, he was a cook. He said that he could be just as much in the presence of God, cooking and cleaning and shopping in the market, as he was during prayer time. And that's because he chose to practice the presence of God at all times. And it looked, basically he suggested that a good habit to get into is that anytime you change what you're doing, you move on to something else maybe, that you say, hey God, I'm here. And whatever you might choose to say to him at that moment. Or if you mess up, say you're like, wow, today I want to not this or not that, or I want to do more of this, or like maybe it's been hours since you checked in with God and you realize you kind of left him behind, Don't just show up and say, wow, I'm sorry, God, that I did that. And then pick up where you left off and move on. Don't just sit there and dwell on what a horrible, awful person you are. No, you can't move into the future with that. You can't.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that was the 1700s, and like in Sabbath school today, I said, oh, that's actually another concept we use in recovery, is for an addict anyway, but we say it's very important that if you make a mistake, deal with it in the moment. Don't let even the little things build, because when an addict will do, he'll make some little mistake and like, oh, that was stupid, and not deal with it and keep going. And throughout the day, little mistake, and they can end up mountaining, and then, by the end of the day, an addict's brain will tell them that you're so bad, you're such a loser, you may as well go ahead and drink, you may as well go and do because it's the only way you're going to feel better, because you are so bad. Look at all these stupid little things you did. And it accumulates. And so we say, it's like, do it in the moment. If you did something to somebody, even in the mid-sentence of saying something that's a lie or yelling or something, stop and make it right and move on. And that's what you were saying, like whatever it is, and that's it. It's not something to carry with you. It's not something to lord over yourself. It's something to deal with and let go and keep going.
Yes, because you're not going to move into the future when you keep dragging the past with you. You're going to stay in the past. So yes, let it go. And God, he doesn't want you to stay back there. He's all ready to go.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that's it for today.
Oh gosh. And here we are at the end.
Yes.
Unexpectedly.
The end.
The end. Yes, the end. Anyway, so yeah. So that's what we did in Sabbath school today.
Yeah, it was much longer-ish there, but...
Yeah, because it's a whole hour and stuff. And we did, questions and interaction. I taught a Bible promise in sign language. It was fun. We can't get into it now. We've done it before. Years ago, we did a couple of them on the Circle of Peace.
Oh, yeah, the Circle of Peace, yeah.
That was fun. Just real quick, tell them.
Oh, the Circle of Peace, right. Okay, so the Circle of Peace is that peace gives us strength, and strength gives us victory, and victory gives us joy. And so we can see that when you think about the Roman soldier going into battle, right? But I got to thinking about it several years after that. After I first thought of that, I thought, wait, that works in the opposite direction as well. Because when we have joy in our relationship with Jesus, that gives us victory over sin. And that victory over sin gives us strength. It strengthens our relationship, our faith, basically, in Jesus. And then that strength of relationship gives us peace in our life because we know that we can trust God.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a circle. I had great diagrams, but I didn't know we were going to talk about this. But it's a circle. One thing leads to the next, and it can work either way. Versus what we were just talking about, it's like we call it a cycle of shame. It's like you have a life event, so you have for students, it's okay. So you failed the test, or you did something in life that you didn't succeed at, right? And that's the event. And then the reaction to that is, I'm such a loser. And then from there it goes, because I'm a loser, I can't do any better, and shame. And then you come back to a life event. The next one is, and you're going to fail that because you've already had the failure here, you're a failure, I can never get any better. And it just keeps repeating itself. And this is kind of the opposite of that, where the joy gives you
victory,
and victory gives you strength, strength gives you peace, and it's breaking bad cycles and living in good cycles, which could be a whole other hour-long presentation. But anyway, so there you go. All right, I guess that's it. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and who knows what we'll be talking about next time. You never know.
That's true. You never know.
Probably Abraham in 4 weeks, but that'll be, and hopefully you've had a good Sabbath, and hope you have a great rest of your